single-story cottages, a church, and a pub. They're the necessities, right? One rather important aspect, however, was missing. If a resident happened to get sick or needed medical attention immediately, like if there was an emergency, it usually meant traveling or a long wait, as there was no hospital, not even one doctor in Nagryev. But that all changed when a stranger arrived in the village in the year of 1911. Julia Fazekas. She was a middle-aged midwife who arrived in Nagryev with her husband already missing, without an explanation. Between 1911 and 1921, she was imprisoned 10 times for performing illegal abortions, but was consistently acquitted by judges who supported abortion. Hungary of the 1910s was a place of political upheaval, crushing poverty, and new options for women. As World War I began in 1914, as many as 9 million men from the former Austro-Hungarian Empire were drafted to serve for the so-called Triple Alliance, and that toll was staggering. During the First World War, for many women, they were left in loveless and fraught marriages with men who they were often afraid of, and that was before they were sent off to war. They had no money, no support, and growing families to look after. They were not left completely without men. However, as Nagryev became a holding camp for the Allied prisoners of war, many of these men were sent to work in the farms that were left behind by the locals. After they were drafted, some became very much a part of the village life, to the point where they started romantic relationships with the married women. Some women, they took on 3 or 4 lovers at a time, which ended up in unwanted pregnancies that Julia would help take care of. In the village, newborns were not always seen as a blessing, but rather a burden. The families simply could not afford more than one child when there was barely enough food to feed anyone. The one-child practice also guaranteed that when the parents would eventually die, their land would not be divided between several children. So, if a woman in Nagryev found herself unwantedly pregnant, Julia was called in to take care of it. After the war, some of Nagrev's men returned to the village but were deeply changed by their experiences on the battlefield. PTSD was not yet an officially recognized condition, remedy. She said, "Listen, if there is a problem with him, I have a simple solution." The solution Julia proposed was deadly arsenic, a common additive in makeup and medicine at the time. She reportedly first tried out the neurotoxin on a romantic rival, and when it proved successful, Julia found a perfect money-making scheme. For a fee, Julia promised to rid these women of their burdensome husbands, a fee which all too many of them were happy to pay. Arsenic poisoning can occur organically through drinking tainted water sources, and that proved enticing to the women who wanted to disguise their crimes as a mere case of cholera because the symptoms were so similar. They were vomiting, abdominal pain, skin discoloration, and more. For the women of Nagryev, a region with little to no infrastructure and no reliable water sources, arsenic poisoning seemed like the perfect crime. But the scheme was too successful. Women of the town were no longer only going to Julia for arsenic to rid themselves of their husbands. They were also using the arsenic to dispose of their parents, to get an inheritance, their romantic rivals, and even to dispose of their children. Damn. Julia was able to keep this grand scheme secret with the help of Susi Ola, a woman who poisoned her husband when she was only 18 years old. When the people of Nagryev had a problem, they went to Auntie Susi. Though she had no formal training, she was the Hungarian village's appointed midwife and the closest Julia Lipka poisoned 7 of her family members, including her husband and stepmother, before instructing the woman next door on how to do it. She said, "I was so sorry for the wretched woman. I gave her a bottle of poison and told her that if nothing else helped her marriage, to try that." In addition, there was Belland Sordas, who poisoned some of her own children because there were too many mouths to feed. Jeez. And Maria, who unalived her husband because he always had his way. In turn, Rosalie and Rose said the men simply bored them. The angel makers were operating for about 10 years. 34 women and 1 man, all of whom were Julia's clients, were arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. 12 of the perpetrators were sentenced to life in prison. While the crimes did stop, the effects of the angel makers of Nagyrév remained for quite some time. An 83-year-old inhabitant of the village, Maria, said in 2004, after the poisoning started, the men's behaviors improved markedly. I mean, this is some wild stuff here. I have a few. Oh my goodness. Number 1, say 100 to 400 men were unalived. That's a lot of men in a kind of a span in this small little village. I'm just wondering, did these men not get suspicious about, hey, why did my buddy over there pass away unexpectedly? He was in good health. I know his marriage wasn't good, but why is he not here anymore? Or a couple weeks later, another guy, another friend, gone. To me, reading the story, it just seems like the men just had no idea that these women were up to this, because in a village, and I lived in a village before, if you come from a small town, people talk. People know what's going on in your household for some reason, or they know. I don't get how these men didn't become suspicious of their wives and be on guard, not to blame them, but then also they did mention PTSD, and their minds probably weren't on that. They were just probably in their own world, trying to get back to somewhat of a normal life, that they didn't suspect what was going on. But it's just too suspicious that all these men are randomly dying that were previously healthy. This created a village of I believe psychopaths, because there's never a reason to unalive somebody, but these women were given a power that they became way too comfortable with, and it's so disgusting, really. To say that, oh yeah, I just took him out because I was bored of him. My goodness. That was a very scary place to live in. That was a very, very scary place to live in. Nobody was safe. They didn't just go after their husbands, their own parents, their own kids. That's why I say it created a village of psychopaths, because don't you have feelings and love for your parents and for your kids, even if times are hard and there's not enough food? To take it into your own hands, to take somebody's life, it's so scary, Anyways, guys, thank you so